Well, today I would like to have some fun. But this is not a fun story, you might be saying. Well, we are going to put the fun back in dysfunctional. The Jacob and Esau story is full of dysfunction. As we are talking about peace this year, I'm reminded of many people who have said over the years, which I agree with, that peace often starts at home, with those who we love and those who we are with most often. That is the place where we need to practice our peace. And since this story is full of dysfunction and is kind of a heavy topic, I do want to have some fun with it, which will come in just a moment. But I want to say that I don't want to make light of the fact that there is a lot of dysfunction in this family. Family dysfunction can be very harmful, and many of us have experienced that in some shape or form. But I also want to acknowledge that in the times we are living in, there is dysfunction all around us, and our nervous systems are struggling to be on high alert all the time. So why not see if we can approach this in a slightly different way, maybe a less threatening way, and maybe it will help us enter with more curiosity. I love how the convergence happened there today. So I have invited 3 people to come forward and help me this morning. They have agreed without much information on what we are doing, but we are going to answer a question of who wants to be a Mennoer? So I'll invite my 3 contestants, shall we say, to come forward. Yes, let's... Now, here's what's going to happen. They're hearing this for the first time as well. I'm going to give each of you a whiteboard, and there will be a question on the screen. You can take a seat in a stool. There will be a question on the screen. It is multiple choice, and you will write your choice on the whiteboard. And keep it secret. You can have a seat, all 3 of you. Turned out I asked 3 educators, which makes sense. Now, we are also going to have those in the studio audience, and those at home can participate as well. You can answer with your multiple choice question, and we're going to have grace for everyone because these are very random questions. Don't worry, it's not about Bible knowledge, in case we were concerned. But I'm going to give a little bit of the story that we just heard. I will ask a question, and then I will give a follow-up fact or information that kind of connects with today or connects with how we might read the Bible well. All right, the first category today is double trouble. Jacob and Esau were not the only twins in the Bible. Ephraim and Manasseh, the grandchildren of Jacob, Tamar and Judah had Perez and Zariah, and Jesus' disciple Thomas was also a twin, and no wonder he was suspicious. So, according to the CDC's most recent data, what percentage of births in the United States are twins? A, 1%, B, 3%, C, 5%, or D, 7%. You can just write the letter corresponding with your answer on your whiteboard or in your mind. Everybody got an answer? All right, let's hold those up. The correct answer is B, 3%. If you want to keep a little tally of your score in the bottom corner, you can. Now, some also wonder if Cain and Abel, the brothers at the beginning of the Bible, were also twins. They had a rivalry much like Jacob and Esau's. An important difference being that Jacob and Esau were able to be reconciled. And instead of hiding from God, Jacob prays to God and wrestles, literally, with God in the midst of seeing in the midst of his fear of seeing his brother again. Esau, rather than returning hurt for the hurt that he had received, broke the chain of violence between them, which allowed them to find peace. All right, category number 2, flipping the script. Jesus is famous for saying, among other things, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. This is not a new idea to Jesus, but something we see throughout the Bible. Joseph, in the Old Testament, was one of the youngest sons of Jacob. Moses was the younger brother of Aaron, and David was the youngest son of Jesse. And so, the question is, the second harvest of this fruit is often richer and sweeter than those from the first harvest of the year. Your options are A, pineapple, B, mango, C, fig, or D, peach. We'll let you lock in your answers. All right, and hold those answers up. The correct answer is C, figs. So keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to tithing, giving to God in some way, often through a church or a spiritual community, we sometimes talk about giving as first fruits. This is a concept that comes from the Bible. Now, the reason that we practice this is not because the first fruits are always the best, but because it requires us to learn trust. Trust that God will bring us more. In an age when they didn't have a grocery store you could just go to, but you had to rely on what would actually come out of your garden, which if that was the case, I would be in big trouble. You would give the first fruits, proving that you trusted God to provide the rest. Number 3, bears, beets, and birthright blessings. Jacob tricked his way into getting both Esau's birthright and blessing. This two-brother story comes up multiple times in the Bible, and the birthright element also comes up again. You may be thinking of the parable of the prodigal son, in which the younger son runs off with his share of the inheritance before his father dies, squanders it, and then returns to a father ready to forgive, but an older brother who is envious and enraged. These stories are meant to connect with each other. Now, along a similar lines, which animals inherit their territory from their parents? Bears, lions, sloths, or meerkats? Think about this one. If we were in England, I might pronounce it sloths, which actually seems kind of appropriate. All right, let's lock in our answers. All right, let's see. Contestants, the correct answer is D, meerkats. We've said it before, and we'll say it again. Hurt people hurt people. And this happens again and again in the book of Genesis. Jacob inherited his father and grandfather's tendency to deceive in order to receive a blessing. This is a good reminder for all of us to be mindful of the traits we take on from our families of origin, emphasizing the good and working on healing from the harmful. All right, number 4, culinary clashes. Food shows up all over the Bible, and feasting often shows up at times of celebration for the purpose of peacemaking, which is why we are doing the peace table, and is connected with sacrifices. In a psalm that you may be familiar with, Psalm 23, the psalmist speaks of God setting a table with his enemies, with oil and drink in abundance. When yearly or significant sacrifices were made in the Old Testament, the community was invited to feast together. Now, we don't have the same kind of sacrifices anymore, but instead we have potlucks. So, what is the most common dish brought to a church potluck in the United States, besides the ironically named deviled eggs? And this is according to the Pioneer Woman. Your options are A, tater tot casserole, B, mac and cheese, C, Jell-O salad, or D, fried chicken. Ready? All right, show your answers. The correct answer is B, mac and cheese. I will not be taking a side on whether it is a side or a main dish. It's just what it is. Now, in our story, food is used in the opposite ways than it often is in the Bible. Instead of bringing people together, it is used to manipulate and control. Today, we often see food insecurity used as a political pawn in a similar way. There is more than enough food produced, and yet plenty go without, due to choices made at in legislatures, whether it be at the national or state level. Often, this benefits the needs of the few at the expense of the many. So I wonder, could we be repeating the sins of Jacob by doing this? Sorry, that got a little bit of a downer. Next question, rushing the blessing. Throughout the stories of the Bible, God makes promises of blessings, but it is rarely clear on the timeline of those blessings. We see in our story for today, and in many others, people taking matters into their own hands and often causing harm. Abraham uses Hagar to produce the heir he was promised. Adam and Eve eat the forbidden fruit to take a shortcut to become more like God. And Rebekah helps her son to manipulate situations to ensure his promised position of prominence will come to pass. You could say they were rushing the blessing. Speaking of rushing, according to a study done in 2023, which city in the world has the worst rush hour traffic based on time lost in traffic congestion? A, New York, B, Paris, C, London, or D, Istanbul? Give you a moment to lock in your answers. Ready to reveal? All right, and the correct answer is A, New York. Who knew? Now, nobody likes waiting in traffic. But if you do find yourself waiting in traffic, I have some great podcast suggestions for you. This is not a paid advertisement. But I would suggest the Bible Project if you want to learn more about the Bible. Jamar Tisby's Footnotes podcast is a really great one that deals with faith and the marginalized. The Bible and Faith for Normal People is a great way to experience the Bible and things of faith in a more accessible way. And if you want something silly and fun, Faith Adjacent is always a good listen. Number 6. Creative accounting, something we would never do here at Silverwood. Something is missing from Jacob's story that we heard today, read up here. And that is how he got this giant flock. He once again tricked his relative into making a deal to take only the spotted and the striped animals of Laban's flock. Through selective breeding and folk wisdom, he was able to produce for himself a strong and massive flock. When it came time to try and bribe his brother Esau for forgiveness, he had a huge flock to choose from. 220 goats, 220 sheep, 30 camels, 50 cows, and 30 camels. This gift, if we want to call it a gift, to Esau would have quite the market value today. So according to the market values in 2013, sorry, that was the most recent I could find, how much would this be worth in US dollars? So 220 goats, 220 sheep, 30 camels, 50 cows, and 30 camels. Is it A, $654, B, $6,549, C, $65,490, or D, $654,900? Ready? The correct answer is D, $654,900. Crazy. Now, estimates in 2021 said that it would cost about 40 billion US dollars per year to provide food to every person in need in the world. In the same year, the US budget for the Department of Defense, now named the Department of War, was just over 800 billion. That means that ending world hunger would mean taking just 5% of our annual budget for death and destruction to provide food on people's tables. Though prices of food have obviously increased, we know that from our grocery bills, so has Department of Defense spending. Now, according to the budget for discretionary spending for fiscal year 2026 that is being considered, it is being proposed that the budgets for Department of Defense and Homeland Security be increased, while the Department of Education be cut by 15%, Health and Human Services be cut by 26%, Housing and Urban Development by 44%, the EPA by 54%, and the state and international programs by a whopping 83%. The problem is not that we don't have enough resources. The problem is where we put it. Okay, last question, and a little bit lighter. Forgiving without forgetting. Our story today ends with a more or less happy ending. So I'll try to stop all the sad facts now and end on a higher note. Forgiveness is a tricky thing, though. While it's often better for us in the long run to not hold on to grudges, the whole forgive and forget can create dangerous situations for those who have been harmed. The brothers found peace, but they also just went their own ways, as the story says. Even when reconciliation is possible, it usually doesn't mean things go back to exactly how they were. We often have to find new ways of being in order to move forward in fruitful and mutually beneficial ways. So for our last question, according to Dr. Frederick Luskin, director of Stanford University Forgiveness Project, which of the following is shown to increase or be improved as a result of forgiveness? Is it A, hope, B, self-confidence, C, compassion, D, immune response? Which one of these will increase or be improved? Are we ready? All right, you can give your answer, and I tricked you. It's all of them. There are a lot of positive things that can come out of forgiveness, not just the peace that we make outside, but also peace within, and that changes a lot. Thank you to our contestants today. Let's give them a round of applause. You may return to your seats. Thank you. Hopefully we all won. So in many ways, humanity repeats the same stories over and over again. As you can see in this story of Jacob and Esau, we struggle with envy, control, trying to force or rush a blessing. But that's not the end of the story. We have a chance to interrupt the flow of these negative and harmful ways of being. Esau at the end of this story is much like God, long-suffering, yet offering grace. There is grace enough for all, even for the Jacobs among us, which in a lot of ways is all of us. Would you join me in prayer? God, we thank you for your presence and your grace among us, that we can experience that grace and go forward and spread that to those around us. God, may we also have grace for ourselves. We may not get every question right, But as we seek you and follow you, may we learn and become more like you. We pray these things in Jesus' name.